Good day, class. So today we'll begin our discussion sa business taxation. Okay, so as we will begin it by introducing business taxation in this lesson. So we know from the name itself, business taxation, this is a tax, right? From businesses, right? So in a simpler way, yes, that is correct. Pero in order to get a deeper understanding on the definition of business taxation, let's take a look at the nature of the business tax itself. So we have four natures of business tax. We have your relative consumption tax, indirect tax, privilege tax, and a national tax. Okay. So business tax is a relative consumption tax. So we say that it is a consumption tax because it is a tax on the consumption of goods or services. And it's so yun nga, it is a tax on the consumption of goods or services. That's why we call it a consumption tax. Pero we call it a relative consumption tax because it is only imposable when the seller is a business. Alright? So that's why it's called business tax. Kasi kapag ang seller ay hindi business, it is not subject to business tax. So business tax is also an indirect tax. Okay? So we say indirect when the tax subjected, uh, when the object or the person subjected to the tax is different from the one who's paying it. Okay, so in this case, the business tax, the tax is collected from the seller, okay, rather than the buyer or consumer who in turn pays it. So an example nito is the VAT or value added tax. So 'di ba kapag bumibili tayo ng any goods sa grocery man 'yan, so if you take a look at the receipt, then you can identify na meron kang binayarang value added tax. Okay, so from that value added tax, ikaw yung in effect ikaw yung nagbayad. Pero ang magko-collect or the tax is collected from the seller. Kahit even though na ikaw yung nagbayad, the seller is the one who is going to pay it to the authorities. Okay, next is it is a privilege tax. Okay, so when we say it is a privilege tax because business tax taxes are privileged to do business. Okay, so that's why we call it a privilege tax. Next one, it is a national tax. So we call it a national tax kasi it is imposed by the national government. So we have we have taxes imposed by the local government. So business tax is not one of those. It is imposed by the national government. So these are the four natures of business tax. So we have three types of business tax. Okay, so we are three types. Yung na-mention ko na kanina is your percentage tax, ay yung value added tax. Yung isa is the percentage tax, and the last one is the excise tax. So a percentage tax is a tax imposed on persons or entities who sell or lease goods, properties, or services in the course of trade or business, whose gross annual sales or receipts do not exceed 550,000 and are not VAT registered. Okay, so ang percentage tax kasi and value added tax, they are related. Right? They are related. Those who pay percentage tax do not pay value added tax. They do not pay it to the authorities. While those who pay value added tax, in turn, do not pay percentage tax. So, ang percentage tax, this is a tax imposed on persons who sell or lease goods, properties, or services na may annual sales na hindi nag-exceed ng 550,000. Because if a sale or if the gross annual sales or receipts of a certain business exceeds 550,000, it will the law requires them to be registered as a uh, VAT registered taxpayer. So meaning kailangan sila magbayad ng value added tax. Pero kapag hindi naman nag-exceed ng 550,000 ang gross annual sales or receipts ng isang business, then he is not required to be registered as a VAT payer. Pero he has the choice to be to register as a VAT taxpayer or as a VAT payer. Okay, so kapag below 550,000, he is not required pero he has the option to pay to register as a VAT payer. So, in order for a business to be subject to percentage tax, it should be below 550,000 and should not also be VAT registered. Okay? So, yun. Because if a business is above 550,000 or chooses to be VAT registered, then of course, he is subject to a value-added tax. So, a value-added tax is a business tax imposed and collected from the seller in the course of the trade or business on every sale of properties, lease of goods or properties, or vendors of services. It is an indirect tax, sabi ko kanina, thus it can be passed on to the buyer. Okay, so yun, ang percentage tax and value-added tax, they are actually the same the two sides of the same coin. So the next is the excise tax. So an excise tax or the excise tax is a tax on the production, sale or consumption of a commodity in a country. It applies to goods manufactured or produced in the Philippines for domestic sale or consumption or for any other disposition and to imported goods. So, excise tax, unlike percentage and value-added tax, can be paid even though nagbabayad ka ng either percentage or value-added. So, hindi siya connected mismo sa percentage and value-added tax. So, a taxpayer can pay percentage tax and he can also be a subject to excise tax. Uh, of course, he can be subject to value-added tax and be subject to excise tax as well. So, hindi sila connected sa percentage and value-added tax. Okay? So, in order to better understand the three types of business tax, let's compare each and every one of them. So, we have the comparison of the types of business taxes. So, we have here your VAT or value-added tax, we have here your percentage tax, and we have here your excise tax. Here are the points of differences of all of these taxes. Okay, so first we have the timing of imposition. So, a value-added tax is tax kapag merong sale. Okay, kapag merong sale. The same goes with percentage tax kasi nga they are the same side of the two sides of the same coin. While an excise tax is imposed on the production or import of commodities or goods, right? So instead of selling in the point of sale, they are taxed at the point of production or the import. Okay, so next is the nature. So a VAT or value-added tax is a primary tax, and the same goes with the percentage tax. So as I said before, if a taxpayer has paid value-added tax, then he is not subject to a percentage tax. Kapag ang isang taxpayer is subject sa percentage tax, hindi naman siya subject sa value-added tax. While an excise tax is only an additional tax. So an additional tax in a sense that an excise tax and a taxpayer can be subject to excise tax as well as percentage tax or value-added tax. So sabi ko sa discussion ko kanina. The next is subject businesses. So ano ba yung mga businesses na subject sa ang mga business tax na to? So, for value-added tax and percentage tax, any business in general. So, any business nga in general may be subject to value-added tax or percentage tax. While an excise tax is only the businesses that is subject to excise tax are only those who produce or only producers or importers of excisable products or services. So there are mga ano kasi specific excisable product or services, for example, alcohol, uh, uh, tobacco products. So all of those, any producers or importers of those are subject to excise tax. Next is a taxpayer. Ano ba yung mga taxpayer ng value-added tax? So, a taxpayer ng value-added tax and percentage tax are both businesses. Okay, so business lang ang pwede maging subject sa value-added tax or percentage tax. While under sa excise tax, hindi necessary na business. Okay, so meaning hindi necessary na mag-fit sa description ng business para ma-subject siya sa excise tax. So those who do not fit the criteria to be a business or non-businesses, they are also subject to excise tax. And the last is the usual taxpayers. Okay? So ano yung mga usual taxpayers ng mga business tax natin? So for VAT, value added tax, yung mga usual taxpayers natin is yung mga big businesses. So as I said earlier kasi, uh, yung mga subject or yung mga businesses na may gross annual sales na above 550,000 are subject to value added tax. So imaginein mo, yung mga above 550,000 yung gross annual sales or receipts. So if a business has above 550,000, then he is and it is considered to be a big business. While percentage tax, yung mga usual taxpayers naman nito is yung mga small businesses lang. So those businesses that have below 550,000 gross annual sales or receipts. While for excise tax, big or small businesses. So hindi kasi based sa gross annual sales or receipts ang excise tax. So it is based on the uh, fruit, on the product na produce or ini-import ng business, right? So those are the points of differences between the VAT, percentage tax, and excise tax. Okay, so we will be discussing each and every one of this in our subject separately. This is just an overview and the differences between them. Okay, so let's move on. So here we have the procedures of business taxation. So this is a general procedure, so general steps in what you need to do in the business taxation. So the first one is to evaluate if the sales activity qualifies as a business. Okay? So, of course, business tax nga. So, dapat kailangan natin muna i-determine if a business is, if the taxpayer is a business. Okay, so paano natin determine? So we will get to that later. So first, if the taxpayer is a business, then the business must register for business tax. Okay, if it is not, then the activity is exempt from business tax. Siyempre, kapag ang isang taxpayer or ang isang uh, yung taxpayer is not considered to be a business, then he is not subject to business tax. So if he is a business tax, then if he is a business, then he should register for business tax and kailangan mag-proceed sa following procedures. So number two is to identify the taxable person. Okay? So ano ba yung taxable person na to? Is it an individual or a juridical personality? So if the taxable person is an individual, so we should include all proprietorship businesses, including branches of the individual taxpayer. So kailangan natin i-include ang lahat-lahat na business ng individual na to. But if the taxable person is a juridical, so mga corporations, we should include all branches of the corporate taxpayer. So lahat naman ng branches kapag ito isang juridical. Next, determine the activity type. Okay, so we need to determine whether if the activity of the business is selling of goods or selling of services. If the activity of the business is to sell goods, then we need to determine the sales. Kapag naman ang activity ng business is to sell services, then kailangan natin i-determine yung receipts. Okay? So magkaiba yung sales and receipts. Yung sales, yung nabenta ng business. While yung receipt, yung uh, na-bill o na-bill ng business para sa services. Okay? So once we determined what the amount of the sales or receipts of the business is, we can move on to number 4. Classify the sales or receipts whether they are number 1, exempt sales or receipts. Number 2, uh, sales or receipts subject to specific percentage tax. And number 3, vatable sales or receipts. So, let's go back to number 1. So, exempt sales or receipts. Siyempre, kapag ang sales or receipts ng business is exempt, right? Then then we need to pay, then the business doesn't need to pay any business tax. So, wala siyang babayarang business tax. Kapag naman ang isang business, if the business's sales or receipts are subject to specific percentage tax, right? So, kapag subject sa percentage tax, then kailangan magbayad ng specific percentage tax na yon. Kung ano man yung percentage tax na kailangan niyang bayadan. And number three, kapag ang kapag ang sales or receipts ng isang business is vatable or it is subject to value added tax, right? Then he or she there he or she should proceed to number 5. 6 o number 5. So, kailangan natin determine ang taxpayer registration type. Okay? So, if the receipt or sales of the business is vatable, and if the taxpayer is VAT registered, then he should pay the VAT or value-added tax on the vatable sales or receipts. Kapag naman ang taxpayer is hindi VAT registered, okay, kapag hindi VAT registered ang taxpayer, you should pay the 3% general percentage tax. Then determine the magnitude of 12-month vatable sales at the end of every month. If the 12-month vatable sales is exceeding 3 million, then the person shall register as VAT taxpayer. Okay? So, VAT taxpayer, kailangan siya mag-register if the 12-month vatable sales is 3 million or more. Okay? Kapag kailangan na siyang mag-register as VAT, tapos, siyempre, kailangan na niya magbayad ng VAT prospectively effective on the succeeding monthly vatable sales. Next is if it does not exceed 3 million, the person shall continue to pay yung 3% na general percentage tax on the vatable sales or receipts. Okay? Again, I repeat, kapag hindi siya VAT registered, right? So kung ang isang business is vatable sales or receipts ang kanyang sales or receipts, and he is not a VAT registered, then he should pay 3% general percentage tax. Then, he should check the succeeding monthly vatable sales kung nag-i-exceed ba ng 3 million. Ay, nag-i-exceed ba ng 3 million? O, nag-i-exceed ng 3 million. If the vatable sales exceeds 3 million, then he should register as a VAT taxpayer. Kapag hindi nag-i-exceed, edi he should continue to pay 3% percentage tax. Okay. So again, this is only an overview. We will be discussing this thoroughly in our next discussions. So this is just to give you a general idea. Number 6, determine if the goods or services offered is excisable. Okay, so as I said, pwedeng mag-subject ang isang business sa excise tax at the same time subject siya sa VAT and percentage tax. So, if the goods or services is excisable or subject to excise tax, then you should pay the applicable excise tax in addition to the VAT or percentage tax. Kapag hindi naman, then he should only pay the VAT or the percentage tax. Okay? So, those are the general procedures para sa business tax. So, let's go back to number 1. So, we need to evaluate if the sales activity qualifies as a business. Okay, so paano natin ma-determine kapag ang isang sales activity is qualified as a business? Then, of course, we need to determine what is a business, right? So, ano ba ang business? So, ang dami na natin na-discuss, pero hindi pa natin na-determine kung anong business, right? So, a business refers to a habitual engagement in a commercial activity involving the sale of goods or services for a profit. So this is the definition of a business. So from this definition, we can actually get the elements of the business. So the elements of the business is number 1, should be a habitual engagement. Number 2, should be a commercial activity. Okay, so habitual engagement and commercial activity. So these are the 2 elements. So a habitual engagement, there should be or there must be a regularity in transactions to construe the presence of a business. Isolated or casual sales are not regular activities. Hence, these are presumed not made in the ordinary course of business. So, a habitual engagement, ang sabi dito, kailangan maging regular yung transaction or may regular niyang binebenta, right? For the purpose of making a profit. So, a habitual engagement is normally manifested by a registration with the appropriate agencies. Okay, so normally, we determine a business's habitual engagement through the registration of that said business, right? Kung nag-register siya as a seller of, let's say, mga ulam, right? Kapag nag-register siya as a seller of ulam, then yung ulam, yun yung habitual engagement niya. Pero kung ang business is nag-register siya as a seller of cell phones and laptops and other gadgets, then the sale of cell phones and laptops is considered to be the business's habitual engagement. Okay? So, that is the way in which we normally determine a business's habitual engagement. Pero, non-registration is not an excuse to business taxation. So, hindi excuse ang non-registration for a business to not pay business tax. So, for example, merong business, uh, si, si A. Okay, so si A meron siyang business. Ang business niya is nagbebenta ng mga sapatos. So, si A, hindi siya nag-register. Okay? Hindi niya rin-register yung business niya. So, even though hindi siya nag-register ng business, just from the nature of the business na nagbebenta siya ng sapatos, we can actually determine na yung habitual engagement niya is yung pagbenta ng sapatos. Right? So hindi excuse ang non-registration para hindi magbayad ng business tax. Okay? So a casual sale of a business or transaction, a casual sale transaction of a business is not a business even if profit is derived from the transaction. So on the other hand, a regular selling of goods or services for a profit is a business despite the absence of actual profit from such activity. So a casual sale meaning once in a while lang siyang nagbebenta ng bagay na to, right? It's not a business kahit na nagkakaroon siya ng profit. On the other hand naman, ang regular selling ng isang goods or services is considered to be a business as long as it is for profit. Okay, so yung purpose lang niya na mag-generate ng profit ang kailangan. Hindi necessary na kailangan mag-generate ng profit mismo. So kahit may loss man ang isang business, he or she is subject to a business tax. Okay, so we have an example. So let's have an example. So, Mrs. Ellerton, a medical practitioner, sold his principal residence for 10 million. Okay? So, si Miss Ellerton, nagbebenta ba talaga siya ng real estate? If no, then that is not part of the business. That is not a business kahit na nagkaroon siya ng profit, right? Hindi naman siya registered na magbenta ng real estate. So kahit na nagkaroon siya ng profit from the sale of his residence, that is not considered a business in the eyes of the taxation law. On the other hand naman, Mang Merto, a realty dealer, okay, realty dealer siya, purchased shares of stocks as investments and sold them at a profit. So si Mang Merto is a realty dealer, meaning nagbebenta siya ng mga lupa at mga bahay. So nag-purchase siya ng shares of stocks as investments tapos binenta niya yung stocks niya for a profit. So Mang Merto, even though nagkaroon siya ng profit through the selling of his stocks, it is not considered to be a business kasi nga, hindi yun yung dati niyang ginagawa. Hindi yun yung habitual engagement. Hindi yun yung regular na transaction niya. So on the other hand, if Mang Merto, yung realty dealer natin, is nagbenta ng residence, nagbenta siya ng lupa and bahay, then the profit or loss na na-earn niya, it is subject to business tax. Okay? So as long as the business or the seller is in accordance to the habitual engagement niya, okay, it is subject to business tax. So, hindi kailangan na magkaroon ng profit or loss. Okay, so that is yung meaning habitual engagement na kailangan yung regular transaction, yung subject sa business tax. Kapag yung once in a while lang na binebenta, hindi siya subject sa business tax. Okay, so next is commercial activity. Okay, commercial activity. Oh yeah, kalimutan pala ako. Okay, so meron tayong tinatawag na privilege stores. Okay, so yung privilege stores, we call that tangge. Okay, yung mga tangge. These are stalls or outlets not permanently fixed to the ground, which are put up during special events such as festival or fiestas. So for example, right po, yung mga kapag mayroon tayong kanawidan, may mga stalls na nagbebenta right sa venue ng kanawidan. We call that Tiangge or privilege stores. Okay? To be considered a privilege store, the store should engage business for not more than 15 days. Okay? 15 days yung limit ng pagbenta to be considered a privilege store. Okay? Otherwise, kung nag-exceed siya sa 15 days na limit, then he will be considered as a business and thus subject to a business tax. Okay, so yung mga privilege stores, they are not subject sa business tax kapag they are only selling for that particular event, right? And not more than 15 days. Okay, so for example, let's say we have letter A and letter B. Okay, letter A and letter B. Si letter A, si letter A is nag-set up siya ng stall sa kanawidan. Okay, nag-set up siya ng stall sa kanawidan and yung kanawidan for 7 days lang. Okay, so during that 7 days, at kung ano man yung na-earn ni letter A sa stall niya sa kanawidan, it is not subject to business tax. Kasi nga, hindi siya nag-exceed ng 15 days. Tapos, hindi naman siya palagi nagbebenta aside sa kanawidan. Okay? So, hindi siya subject sa business tax, pero subject siya sa income tax. Okay? So, iba yung income tax sa business tax. So yun si letter A. Now, let's take a look letter B. So, si letter B naman, meron siyang dating business. Meron siyang business na siya ay nagbebenta ng mga souvenirs sa mga tourist. Okay? So, si letter B, nag-set up siya ng stall din sa kanawidan. Okay? So, nagbenta siya ng souvenirs niya for 7 days. So, even though that letter B only sold yung souvenirs niya for 7 days, he will be subject to business tax. Bakit? Because kahit before man sa kanawidan, he was already engaged in selling ng mga souvenirs. Okay, so before man yung kanawidan, he is already considered to be a business. Okay, so from that sale of his business, from that sale of his habitual engagement, okay, he or she is subject to business tax. Okay, so can you see the difference? Letter A, wala siya dating business. Tapos nagbenta siya sa kanawidan for 7 days. Dahil wala siya dating business, he is not subject to business tax. Pero, subject siya sa income tax. Si letter B naman, meron siyang dating business. Tapos nagbenta siya sa kanawidan for 7 days. So, dahil meron siyang dating business, he is already considered a business even before the special event. So, he should be subject to business tax. So, yun. So, yun yung meaning ng habitual engagement. So, the next one is commercial activity. Okay, commercial activity means engagement in the sale of goods or services for a profit. The goods or services must be offered to the public with a motive to earn unrestricted amount of pecuniary gains. Okay, so this is the keywords. He should have a motive to earn unrestricted amount of pecuniary gains. So meaning he or she has the goal to earn a profit. Okay? So ang goal niya is to have gains. Okay? So a business is considered to be a business kapag ang goal niya is magkaroon ng profit or magkaroon ng gains. So, yung goal lang niya ang kailangan doon. Hindi kailangan ng mismong profit or gain. So, sabi ko nga, in the case of loss, a business is still subject to business tax. Kahit meron siyang loss sa business niya. Okay? So, from our example, the following are not businesses from our definition ng business. So the first one is yung government agencies and instrumentalities. Okay? Government agencies and instrumentalities. So, government agencies provide essential public services, right? So yung mga services na yun, they are not intended to make a profit. So, pwedeng mag-charge ang mga government agencies ng mga fees for their services, pero that fee is not intended to earn a profit or to earn a gain. They are merely cost reimbursements. So they are merely collecting fees for the purpose of reimbursing the cost of the said government agency. So the next one is non-profit organizations or charitable associations. So a charitable organization, non-profit organization or charitable association is not considered to be a business. Kasi nga, they do not have the goal to earn a profit. The same goes with the government agencies. So wala silang goal na mag-earn ng profit. Pero in cases na yung meron silang sideline na outside their normal transaction or normal business, right, na nag-earn ng profit, then that business or that specific service or sideline should be subject to business tax. Okay? So yung sinasabi lang natin na services and ano dito is within their specific business. So kung ano man yung goal ng business nila, right? For example, we have PRC sa government agency. So ang PRC, nakakollect sila ng 1,200,000 in the form of professional fees. So dahil sa nature ng PRC is to collect professional fees for reimbursement, they are not subject to business tax. Pero kung ang PRC ay merong sideline, for example, ang PRC is nagpaparenta sila ng isang building and that is not within the authority or that is not within the service of the PRC. So yung na-earn nila na rent from the specific building is subject to business tax kasi nga hindi sakop sa service ng PRC. Next is employment. Okay, employment. So, an employer-employee relationship is not a business, right? Hindi ito subject sa business tax. It is subject to income tax. Okay, so income tax dito, hindi business tax. Kasi, yun nga, it is an income of the individual, not of the business. Okay, so, iba yung employee ka, and iba naman kapag meron kang sariling business. Kung meron kang sariling business, then that is subject to business tax. Okay. Directorship in a corporation. Although a director may not be an employee, the director's fees per diems and allowances are not derived in an economic or commercial activity or rendering services to clients for a fee. Hence, these are not subject to business tax. So the same goes with directorship in a corporation. They are not subject to business tax as well. And last is business for mere subsistence. So when we say for mere subsistence, these are businesses for livelihood. Okay, for livelihood. So we determine or we define the business for mere subsistence as those businesses with gross sales or receipts not exceeding 100,000 per year. So if a business does not exceed 100,000 per year, it is considered to be a business for mere subsistence, and thus it is not subject to business tax. Okay, so that is that will end our discussion for today. So I will be sending this PowerPoint and sana nag-take down notes kayo ng mga sinabi ko. Okay, so thank you for listening, class, and goodbye.